This video was made possible by the generous support of viewers like you. If you enjoyed this video, please consider joining my YouTube membership program to help me continue to create content. Thank you. Greetings and salutations. I'm Madison and welcome to episode 5 of Fashion Archaeology. In this episode, we will be continuing our study of 1920s women's fashion by taking a look at undergarments, swimwear, lounging attire, and sleepwear. If you haven't already seen my previous episodes and want to catch up, I have a playlist of all of my fashion archaeology episodes on my channel, and I will be linking a playlist down in the description box below. So if you haven't already, be sure to check out my previous episodes where we explored 1920s hairstyles, makeup, everyday women's clothing, as well as 1920s clothing for men. Our first topic is undergarments. Underwear was truly a blooming market, as hundreds of different undergarment styles filled catalogs and department store shelves, with the biggest innovation coming in the form of elastic. While most men's undergarments did not have any elastic, women's undergarments saw elastic being used liberally in bandeaus, in the waistbands of knickers, and in shapewear. Speaking of shapewear, this is where we dispel our first myth. It is commonly portrayed that the 1920s was a time when young women were liberated from their grandmother's horrible, suffocating corsets, with all constriction and shapewear being banished from their wardrobes. However, the 1920s did not completely abandon corsetry. While the era did see a shift towards a more relaxed-looking silhouette, shapewear and corsets and body-altering garments still played a big role in achieving the ideal figure of the time. So, if women in the 1920s did wear shapewear, and it was different from the Victorian or Edwardian era, just what did a 1920s corset look like? Well, corsets from this period would either extend from below the chest to just beyond the hips, or they would cover the entire trunk of the body over the chest and the hips. The 1920s corset also utilized elastic as well as boning. Now, there were some upgrades to the manufacturing of corsets. Instead of using real animal bones like whale bones to make corsets, the new technology of the day was coiled steel wire boning, which of course was easier to source. It made mass manufacturing more practical, and steel wire bent easier with the body and kept the shape of the foundation garment for longer. By the end of the 1920s, girdles began to replace corsets for many women, mostly because they were a bit more flexible and made sports and games a little easier to participate in. Girdles would confine and pull the body in while smoothing out imperfections. Instead of boning, thick, sturdy elastic was used to keep everything in place. As you can see, shapewear never truly disappeared, it just adapted to the shape of the times. Instead of a curvy Victorian figure, it was now being used to create that boyish, sleek shape that was oh so popular in the 20s. Curvy figures had dominated fashion trends for years, but the 1920s ushered in a new era. The focus shifted to shapely legs, androgynous styles, and faces bold with makeup. This cultural shift and the rise of a slim, boyish figure demanded a new approach to undergarments. As the flapper silhouette took hold, the demand for bras skyrocketed. Innovation boomed, with nearly 200 patents for bras and corselets filed between 1918 and 1929. There were even outlandish inventions like rubber bras that promised weight loss alongside support, although their effectiveness remains questionable. The most common lingerie fabrics were cotton, silk, and artificial silk, also called rayon. Rayon's easy-to-dye nature introduced a vibrant palette of colors to underwear, but that's not the only reason rayon was popular. Post-World War I, women craved not just beauty, but also hygiene and comfort. Rayon's breathability and durability made it perfect for all kinds of undergarments. Combined with new wash-resistant dyes, underwear became easier to clean and resulted in more frequent laundering. So rayon really offered the perfect solution, balancing both aesthetic and sanitary needs. Now, while some of these bras might look similar to the bras that we wear today, they were not very good at giving lift or support. They could restrict some movement, but they were quite thin, adding only a little bit of modesty and smoothing to the chest area. For some women, such a flimsy bra or camisole sufficed, but for women who did not have a naturally flat figure, they needed to find a way to change their busts to fit the trends of the time. Thus, bust flatteners appeared on the fashion scene. These flatteners were commonly referred to as bandeaus, bust confiners, or bust reducers. Bust confiners could take several forms. Many could be laced on both sides and then pulled in to flatten the chest, or one could opt for an all-in-one corset that flattened everything from the chest to the hips. Those who could not afford store-bought or catalog-bought undergarments had to take matters into their own hands, either sewing their own bras and underwear, or to flatten the bust, they would bind their chest in strips of old sheets or spare fabric. Knickers or bloomers were the words usually used to describe the lower half of underwear in the 1920s. Early in the decade, bloomers were long, falling just above or at the knee. Later, as the decade progressed, they had transformed into wide-leg sort of shorts that hit high on the thigh, and they were frequently paired with a matching brassiere. Many undergarments featured some sort of applique or beadwork or lace that gave women, again, that touch of movie star glamour to enjoy in their everyday lives. Like I mentioned earlier, the 1920s saw a lot of innovation in undergarments, so there were many different styles. There were one-piece options, there were two-piece options, short sleeve, long sleeve, frilly, plain, just so many different styles. I do think it is important to mention that While there were so many styles and beautiful, extravagant lingerie pieces available, there were still plenty of women that could only afford simple, plain white undergarments or just wanted simple, plain undergarments. Just because something was more affordable doesn't mean that everyone could afford them. So it's always important to keep that in mind, that while there are trends, there were many women who only slightly partook in trends or just did not absorb the trend at all. Slips were another useful layer for attaining that tubular silhouette. They helped maintain the right fit and flow of dresses, and since this was the era of sheer dresses, they provided a little bit of coverage as well. While it was appropriate for a slip to show through a sheer dress, it was not appropriate to have a contrasting color, a mismatched slip, or one that hung lower than the hem of the dress. The right way to wear a slip was to color match the dress and to hit just underneath the hem of the dress. Slips also provided a barrier between the undergarments and the outside dress. If you did not have a slip, the girdle or corset or bust flattener would surely show through. So the slip sort of created this smoothing layer in between underwear and outerwear. Moving down the body, we have stockings and garters. Regardless of a woman's age, stockings and hosiery were an essential part of her attire, and a lady never left the house without them. As the 20s progressed and as hemlines became shorter, stockings were being clearly seen for the first time. No longer a neutral undergarment occasionally seen in a flash of movement, stockings were now thrust into the forefront of attention. By the mid-1920s, anything was possible, from a wide selection of colors to playful prints, bold stripes, hand-painted designs, and embroidery, with the most extravagant boasting real gold or silver threads. Flappers, known for pushing the fashion boundaries, took things a step further. They rolled down their stockings, playfully revealing their bare knees, a trend singularly unique to the Roaring Twenties. They even accentuated their knees by applying rouge and painted pictures or designs straight onto the kneecap and shin. The cost of stockings depended mostly on the materials used to make them. Summer stockings, of course, used lighter fabrics and colors, while winter stockings embraced rich jewel tones, and they were made with thicker material. Silk was the best of the best. It was dainty, light, and gave a more tailored fit. The drawback was that they were very expensive, they could only be worn for special occasions, and they were so delicate that they only lasted 2 to 3 wears at most. The next step down was rayon. Rayon had the breathability of cotton and the beautiful sheen of real silk, but obviously much more affordable. The problem was that rayon was just a bit too shiny, so women had to powder them to make them look more like real silk. So while it was more affordable, it still was not the most practical option if every time you wore them you would have to powder the lower half of your leg. Next down the line of quality was cotton, whose prices ranged from low to moderate. Cotton was more durable than silk or rayon and more comfortable than wool. At the bottom of the stocking quality chart, we have wool. Wool stockings were the cheapest and most durable option, with thicker ones being ideal for the cold winter months. Because they were strong, they could be used for a long time and even be repaired if torn. But the downside was that they didn't hold shape very well, so they could be quite unflattering. And wool being wool, it was quite uncomfortable to wear them for a long period of time. They would be itchy and just not as comfortable as cotton or rayon. Unlike modern pantyhose, stockings were not all one piece, and they required garters or garter belts to stay up on the leg. Garter belts were fabric waistbands with several dangling fabric strips. On the end of these strips there would be little clips or snaps that secured the stocking at the thigh. These worked for the most part to hold the stocking in place, but they were not perfect, and often women would have to adjust their garter belts and reattach the stocking to them. Corsets and girdles could also have these convenient clips at the bottom, making them truly a multi-purpose garment in a lady's wardrobe. Now, garters were a little different than garter belts. The idea of garters was actually older than garter belts. You needed two, one for each leg, and they held up the stocking by tightly wrapping around either at the knee or at the top of the stocking. While traditionally a practical garment, garters evolved into a flamboyant accessory. Flappers wore them daringly low, even below the knee around the calf. Some took it even a step further by using them to hold cigarettes, flasks, or even, for the very rebellious, concealed weapons. The most expensive and luxurious garters were made of metal, and they were almost like a bracelet for your leg. These more luxurious garters could be made of precious metals like gold or silver and feature elegant engraving or dazzling expensive jewels. Finally, for winter, there were woolly union suits, fleece-lined underwear, and wool slips. These pieces might have a bit of lace, but they mostly prioritized practicality and warmth over frills and fashion. Woolly union suits were one-piece undergarments, similar to men's union suits, but they could be shortened in the legs and arms to accommodate the new trendy shorter hemlines. This all-in-one approach ensured that no drafts could sneak in, and it helped maintain a consistent body temperature throughout the day. So, if you were wondering how women could wear skirts and dresses in the snow, woolly union suits, fleece-lined underwear, and wool slips were their secret. While silk stockings remained a quintessential accessory throughout the 1920s, the decade did witness a growing popularity of socks for women. The main cause of this trend? World War I. Because of the war, women had to adopt more practical clothing, especially during the harsh winters. By the post-war era, women had become accustomed to the comfort and utility of trousers and boots, and thus naturally found themselves embracing socks as well. Much like the playful patterns and colorful designs adorning men's socks, women's socks embraced that similar sense of whimsy. this offered a new way for women to add an extra touch of personality and color to their outfits, further reflecting the flamboyancy of the mid to late 1920s. As we discussed in the last episode, the post-war era saw a surge of public interest in outdoor activities, leisure, and exercise for health. As the middle class gained more free time and a disposable income, beaches became one of the most popular spots to mix both health and leisure, as well as the ideal place to catch the new trendy warm glow of a suntan. In the early 1900s, bathing costumes covered pretty much the entire body and were designed to be as modest as possible. But because of the new trendy tan, swimwear underwent a dramatic transformation. Sleeves disappeared, then hemlines crept up to the mid-thigh. The back and neckline dipped low, revealing the décolletage. The name swimsuit itself was first coined by the Janzine Knitting Mills, and in 1921, Janzine introduced for the first time this new and very popular tight-fitting swimsuit. Now, of course, not every woman was eager to reveal so much, so ladies did have a variety of choices to choose from. Mostly, ladies could choose between two main styles: a more conservative swim dress with long stockings and pantaloon shorts, or the more tight-fitting one-piece swimsuit. Materials used to make swimwear were either ribbed jersey or thick wool. Though wool may seem like an unusual choice for swimwear, it was the most commonly used material for several reasons. Wool was easy to source, and its affordability made it a practical choice because most people could afford to have a swimsuit. Additionally, wool provided warmth in cold water, and it was more elastic, giving the wearer more freedom of movement while swimming. There were, however, some downsides. Notably, wool suits would become quite heavy when wet, and they would also become weaker when wet, so they could be damaged fairly easily over time. Plus, they were a favorite snack of moths while in storage during the off-season months. Drawing inspiration from the vibrant sportswear of the era, 1920s bathing suits also embraced bold color palettes and playful patterns. The classic nautical themes of red, white, and blue were the most popular, but bathers could also splash around in purples, mustards, jade greens or dark greens, pinks, and oranges. Geometric designs, striped hems, and even personalized monograms added a unique flair to suits. Many bathing clubs and hotels even offered rentable suits. These displayed the club's logo or hotel emblem, serving as a subtle form of advertising while also providing a convenient option for visitors who came without a swimsuit. While most people were not bothered about the new beach fads, public nudity was still a concern in the early days of the 1920s. Some towns employed beach censors, or the police, to patrol the beaches. Armed with measuring tapes, they hunted down immodesty down to the very inch. These censors were given permission to send men or women home and ask them to cover up if they were showing too much. If that person refused, they could be slapped with a hefty fine or even hauled off to jail. Despite the public shaming, these new styles were unstoppable and were largely embraced both by the public and by department stores alike. While in Europe, new styles were quickly being accepted, in the United States it took a bit more time for people to accept this rather scantily clad idea of short bathing suits. However, once the entertainment industry saw that this could be a marketable product and be used to entertain, Hollywood played a big part in promoting the bathing beauty idea. Soon, these new swimsuits were adorning the silver screen. They could be seen on magazines and in advertising all over the United States. Beach beauty contests began to appear from coast to coast as women shared their most creative suits and daring figures. With this massive amount of public support, the job of beach censors were quickly fading into obscurity by 1930. Some additional swimming gear included rubber belts to keep swimsuits from floating up, swim shoes made of duckskin or rubber, mostly worn at beaches to protect the feet from the harsh rocks or burning sand, and swim caps. Swim caps were essential for protecting the hair from the harsh effects of chlorine, the drying salt water of the beach, and it helped to preserve a lady's hairstyle. With the rise of the iconic bob haircut and elaborate curls and finger waves, keeping hair out of the water became even more important. Like I mentioned earlier, swimming in the water was a relatively new idea. Now women were going all in, and they needed a swim cap to protect their hairstyle from getting ruined. Like swimsuits, there were many different styles of swim caps. Some came in a voluminous bonnet-like shape and were a bit more old-fashioned. Some resembled a cloche hat, and others mimicked aviator helmets worn by airplane pilots. Again, you see a lot of mirroring of what was in focus and grabbing the attention of people at the time being interpreted into fashion. And I think the 1920s is an excellent representation of what people were thinking about, what they were interested in, being clearly reflected into popular fashion styles of the day. Between women branching out and creating their own styles to department stores being oh so happy to provide as many styles as possible, there was no lack in variety. From simple to dramatic, colorful to plain, women's swimwear had become a whole fashion statement in of itself. Continuing on the theme of leisure, we cannot miss talking about beach pajamas. Before the 1920s, women, for the most part, confined wearing pajamas to their homes. But in 1922, beach pajamas were first spotted on European beaches and at seaside resorts. Then, as the decade progressed, they slowly spread over to North America. Blurring the lines between sleepwear, loungewear, and sportswear, beach pajamas' most notable characteristics were the flowing wide-leg trousers combined with sleeveless, sometimes backless tops. They often came in two styles, either a jumpsuit one-piece style or two-piece ensembles with a matching jacket or bolero. As you have seen other trends in this era, I'm sure you can see how this trend came about. It mimics menswear style. It's an opportunity to add bright colors and patterns. It gave women a way to have more comfort and be more casual at the beach, but still add that fashion element to the outfit. All of these pieces come together, and there would be really no other perfect time for the beach pajama to come out other than the 1920s. Plus, because they were made from more affordable fabrics like cotton or linen, most women could wear them. So add that affordability to the mix and you have a huge beach trend. Moving on to our final subject, sleepwear. Experimentation with modesty and the merging of public and private lives resulted in more daring sleepwear designs, and the public developed an openness to showcase lingerie in advertisements, department stores, and even in film. This is a stark contrast to the previous decades where undergarments and sleepwear were more a secret world. Now, with all of the societal change, sleepwear and lingerie were coming to the forefront of public attention. In the early 1920s, some had a bit of tailoring and shape, but most hung freely down from the shoulders to the floor, much like in previous decades. Some could have stripes or dainty flower prints on them. Most had a heavy amount of embroidery around the neck, with a bit of lace embellishment at the collars and cuffs. By the middle of the 1920s, many nightgowns and negligee sets gave way to shorter hemlines, with an increased use of silk, rayon, lace, and chiffon. Soft pastels and more streamlined designs gained in favor, and nightgowns and pajamas began to shift to simpler designs and printed patterns. Summer nightgowns with folk embroidery from the Philippines or Puerto Rico were particularly in high demand. Loungewear and negligee, on the other hand, remained a luxurious garment with heavy ornamentation and lots of lace. Made from crepe, satin, or velvet, and accentuated by feathers, flowers, ribbons, negligee had no real practical advantage. They were instead purely a status symbol for women who could afford such a luxury, and they were pretty much worn for aesthetics alone. While sleeping pajamas had been prevalent in past decades, the 1920s saw this trend really gain traction and become less of a novelty and more of a staple in women's wardrobes. Usually belted at the waist, two-piece pajama sets were made up of long trousers and a loose-fitting tunic top. They could be plain or have just as much color and decoration as nightgowns. Most pajamas also had a contrasting border print or color at the hemline, especially at the arms and on the legs of the trousers. Both pajamas and beach pajamas drew inspiration from Asian Indian styles, Chinese, Japanese, and Turkish designs. So the pajama was also a great representation of how the world was becoming smaller. We were seeing more influences from the East leak over into the West. Even the very word pajama is borrowed from the Persian and Indian languages. The words pai and jama did not describe a sleeping garment, but rather described a two-piece everyday garment set. Pai specifically referred to the leg covering, while jama was the word to describe clothing in general, but also the matching top overcoat piece that would go with the leg covering. The terms housecoats, bathrobes, and dressing jackets could all fall either into the negligee category or the more practical category, with fabrics and styles better suited for everyday wear. In the summer, lighter and breezy materials were utilized, while in the winter, heavier materials like velvet, corduroy, and flannel were used. Bathrobe fashion frequently followed the latest trends in regards to popular dress styles and coat styles. You can easily notice a similarity between both of them if you compare them side by side like this. Note the large shawl collars, the oversized pockets and cuffs, the dramatic dropped waist. Even the closure of the robe had moved from the center of the body over to the side, and they were either tied or buttoned low at the hip, just like popular coats at that time. Much like bathing bonnets protected the hair from being damaged while swimming, boudoir caps were worn at night to protect a woman's hairstyle while she slept. These bed caps were crucial to ensuring that a wet-set hairdo held its shape over several days. Boudoir caps were worn in a variety of ways. They could cover the whole head or simply cover the pin curls that surrounded the crown of the head. The best caps, to minimize frizzy hair, were usually made of satin or silk, although many frugal ladies could crochet their own or use leftover sewing scraps to make a cap for themselves. Some of these caps strongly reminded me of 1920s bridal hair accessories, especially the ones that were mostly comprised of ribbons and flowers. Finally, we have slippers, which of course complete a woman's entire pajama ensemble. Again, we see sleepwear mimicking daywear, with everyday slippers closely resembling the loafers and pumps that were being worn out on the street. Made of supple leather or velvety warm felt, they could be accented with fleece, ribbon, or lace trims, and were frequently topped on the vamp by a whimsical pom-pom or a little bow. The most fancy boudoir slippers were the height of elegance. These soft, heeled pumps or slip-on mules were usually adorned with fur, feathers, or silk ribbons, and were constructed from brocade, satin, or quilted silk. Usually reserved for special occasions and hosting, boudoir slippers paired perfectly with hostess jackets, kimonos, and negligee. And that is the end of Fashion Archaeology Episode 5. A special thanks goes out to all of my YouTube membership partners for helping me to create this episode and giving me monthly support for my work. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. To help keep my channel going, join my YouTube membership community to gain access to special perks and exclusive content, all while giving my channel financial support. Thank you so much for watching.